This week I made some kofta samis with tabouli and hummus. We're going to start by washing a quarter cup of cracked bulgur wheat. I went with a fine grind, but if you like bigger pieces, you could use that instead. We'll drain that, then pour in enough boiling water to cover the wheat by about 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 inch. Cover that and let it rest for 30 minutes. In the meantime, we'll prep the rest of our tabouli ingredients, starting with 1/4 of a yellow onion. My family prefers that we go lighter on the onion, but if you like onion, I suggest using 1/2 a medium onion instead. Chop that into very fine pieces and set it aside. Next, we'll take 2 tomatoes, chop them into slices, then we'll cut those into super fine pieces as well. Finally, we'll bring in 4 small cubes, decide that's too many, and chop up 2 really fine. I like to slice them in half lengthwise so I have a flat edge. This makes chopping a lot easier. Next, we'll pluck 4 bunches of curly parsley, but divide this evenly between 2 mixing bowls. We'll use the other 2 later. Now take 2 plucked bunches and throw that in a food processor. We'll chop that in bursts until all the parsley is chopped up really fine, and then we'll pour it back into the mixing bowl. Head back over to the bulgur wheat and, in a cheesecloth or some other very thin cloth, we'll firmly squeeze out as much water as we can. Once that's done, add it to your parsley. Now we'll bring in the onion, the cukes, and the tomatoes, hit it with about 1/2 teaspoon of salt, then we'll pour in 2 tablespoons of lemon juice, and to start, about 1 tablespoon of olive oil. Give that a thorough mix and then give it a taste. You don't want it to be too salty, too lemony, or too oily, but you should be able to taste the lemon juice with a little bit of the oil. Give the food processor a good clean, and then we'll pour in 2 cans of drained garbanzo beans, aka chickpeas. Now we'll add in 2½ large cloves of garlic, about 4 tablespoons of lemon juice, then we'll hit it with salt. Now we'll give it a cursory chopping and come back and add in a heaping tablespoon of tahini, or about 1½ tablespoons. Now we'll give that another processing for a couple minutes, pop the top off and use a spatula to help mix it up a bit. Then we'll process it for 3 to 5 more minutes or until smooth. My family prefers a thick hummus, so be prepared for this to be more like a spread and less like a dip. Now that we're not seeing any whole beans, we'll call it good. Now we'll return to the plucked bunch of parsley and throw that into a small food processor along with 7 chopped green onions that have been cleaned and the ends have been removed. This will help make sure the parsley and green onions, or gronies as we call them in the studio, are chopped extremely fine and almost form a paste. Make sure to pause occasionally to move the mixture around. Once it's all minced, give it a check to make sure there aren't any large pieces hiding in there, then we'll set it aside. In a large mixing bowl, we'll place 1 pound of Midamar's halal ground lamb and 2 pounds of Midamar's halal 80/20 ground beef. Give that a rough mixing by hand, then we'll add in our parsley mixture. Mix that up again until everything is roughly incorporated. Now we'll add in 2 tablespoons of dried crushed mint and 1 tablespoon each of salt and pepper. Normally, I'd say add that to taste, but in this case, 1 tablespoon each is the bare minimum for this amount of meat. Now we'll bring in an aluminum foil wrapped baking sheet and some skewers. I forgot to spray mine with nonstick spray, so do that now. Take about 1 to 2 cups of meat and mold it along the skewer. Don't make these too thick though. The thicker they are, the longer they'll take to cook, and they'll get really dry really quickly. You could also roll the meat out and skewer it afterwards, either way works. If you don't have skewers or don't feel like using them, we'll sometimes form the kofta into patties and grill that instead. Once your skewers are all done, we'll head out to the grill and cook those over medium-high heat. While these cook, this is a good time to mention that kofta is typically served with grilled tomatoes and onions, but it doesn't have to be every time. Once that's cooked all the way through, we'll pull it off the heat and serve it with our hummus, tabouli, and some Arabic bread. And that's it! This is one of my favorite meals, and I hope you like it as much as I do. We'll see you next week with another tasty halal recipe.